Добрый день.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues and guests. Today, the 24th of February 2022, 3 o'clock Moscow time, we are starting the meeting of the Dissertation Council on the defense of the thesis by Shamrai and Grigorievich for the scientific degree of the candidate of political sciences, Major 599, Media Communication and Journalism, on the topic Communication Design in Regional Public Administration, Socio-Cultural Practices. We may consider the meeting open. If necessary, we will announce a technical break. By the order of the Secretary of State University, Ignatov Alexander Valentinovich, from the 8th of December 2021, I, Melnik Galina Sergeyevna, Doctor of Political Sciences, Professor, the Professor of Department of Media Communication of St. State University, was appointed the Chairperson of the Council. The members of the Council are the following: Nikonov Sergei Borisovich, Doctor of Political Sciences, Professor of the Department of International Journalism, St. State University; Pantarev Konstantin, Doctor of Political Sciences, Associate Professor, Professor of the Department of Theory and History of Foreign Relationships, St. State University. In the remote access mode are the following members of the Council: Kaminskaya Tatiana, Doctor of Philological Sciences, the head of the Department of Journalism of Novgorodsky State University. Can you hear and see us? The answer is positive. Alynikov Sergei Viktorovich, Doctor of Political Sciences, the Professor of the Department of Journalism of Pridnestovsky State University, Moldova. Can you see and hear us? The answer is positive. Shamrai Andrey Grigorievich is also present at the meeting. The scientific advisor, the Doctor of Political Sciences Professor, the head of the Department of Public Relations in Politics and State Administration, Ashkasova Vera Alexeyevna, is present at the defense. In order to improve the quality of communication, I would ask my colleagues in the remote access mode to turn off their microphones, but please don't forget to turn them on when you're given the floor. I would also like to remind you that audio-visual broadcast is being carried out, as well as consecutive interpreting. On the screen of the live broadcast, currently, you can see the email address toward which, during the meeting of the Dissertation Council, it is possible to send questions and remarks pertaining to the scientific discussion and the presentation or the thesis of the applicant, and they will be voiced by the chairperson. The questions are to be directly related to the content of the thesis. It is necessary to indicate name, surname, job, place of work. All the questions not related to the scientific discussion will not be voiced. Anonymous questions will not be voiced as well. In accordance with the procedure of awarding the scientific degrees of the Candidate of Sciences and Doctor of Sciences, the meeting of the Dissertation Council is considered valid if no less than 2/3 of the approved membership take part in its operation. Our Dissertation Council consists of 5 members, and all 5 are present, including 2 members in the remote access mode. Audio-visual contact is provided. Thus, there is quorum. I would like the official to issue a turnout list. The procedure of the meeting, with the approximate duration of 2 hours, is the following: brief information about the applicant and the documents submitted by the applicant and their compliance with the requirements. But 5 minutes. 2. Brief report by the applicant on the major provisions of the thesis, about 15 minutes. 3. Questions to the applicant strictly on the presentation. Responses of the applicant, no more than 5 minutes. Voicing the reviews by the members of the Dissertation Council, about 10 minutes per person. The speech by the chairperson with the review and remarks. The responses of the applicant to the questions and remarks. Finally, the open discussion. Those present at the defense might have the floor and ask their questions and provide remarks on the topic of the defense. Nine. Voicing of the questions received via email during the live broadcast. I'd like to pay attention that the written questions which require more than 2 minutes to be voiced will not be voiced. 10. Answers by the applicant. 11. Speech by the scientific supervisor, no more than 3 minutes. 12. Discussion by the members of the Dissertation Council of the results of the defense with muted sound, 5 minutes. 13. Open roll call, voice count with a subsequent entry of the results in the minutes of the meeting. Taking the decision on awarding or not awarding the scientific degree, and the final word to the applicant. Dear colleagues, are there any questions or objections to the procedure? None. So I start conducting the meeting. The thesis by Shamrai, Andrey, Grigorievich. Applicant for the scientific degree of Canada Political Sciences, Major 599, Media Communication Journalism, on the topic Communicative Design in Regional Public Administration and Social-Cultural Practices, was taken for defense on the 17th of November 2021, order number 111113/1. Shamrai and Grigorievich carried out the research on the basis of State University. Scientific advisor is the Doctor of Political Sciences professor, the head of the Department of Public Relationship and Politics and State Administration, State University, Zitchkasova Vera Alexeyevna. The number of publications, according to the list provided by the applicant, are 4 published works. All 4 are published in the publications approved by the Ministry of Ministry of Education of the Russian Federation. All the documents obtained from the applicant comply with the St. Petersburg State University requirements and can be found in the dissertation file of the applicant. Prior to giving the floor to the applicant, I would like to ask the members of the Dissertation Council. Dear members of the Dissertation Council, do you have any general questions to the applicant? Is there a need to voice the entire list of the document provided by the applicant for the defense? No, there is no need for it. Are there any questions? General questions? Thank you, colleagues. A few words about the procedure. I would offer to answer the questions after all the reviews are voiced. And now we'd like to give the floor to to Shamrai Andrey Grigorievich. Dear Chairperson of the Dissertation Council, dear members of the Dissertation Council, social planning and design are very important tools of public administration. And today we can talk about the need to create an operation of communication environment. Informatization has an ambiguous effect on society. Its spontaneous and regulated dissemination reduces its analogical value and stimulates craving for entertainment. The complexity of the relationship between different cultural paradigms in the digital society can be seen in the example of the problems of such traditional form of transferring cultural tradition as a book, the world which began to be called retrograde, almost hindering the progress of digital technology. In such condition, methodology and practice of socio-cultural design becomes a response to the challenges of social development. At the same time, state support of this area of cultural policy is of significant importance, an example of which is the holding of international book fairs in St. Petersburg since 2006. Analysis of the form and effectiveness communication information of book-oriented projects against the backdrop of crisis phenomena in this sphere is an extremely relevant topic that allows us to determine the prospects and directions of state policy. The purpose of the work is to determine the effective forms of communication support for a regional socio-cultural project, taking into account the current crisis of books and reading. The object of the research is the communication environment of the state project management. The subject of the research is the process communication of the regional socio-cultural project. The necessity to achieve the goal led to the formulation of the set of tasks, such as to determine the place of design in the system of state social policy, explore the goals and forms of communication information support for state social projects in the condition of modern Russian society, analyze the impact of innovative technical means on modern society, cultural traditions, and communication practices. To study problems associated with the accelerated development of informatization and virtual communication that affect the world of books and reading, show the importance of a projective state socio-cultural policy in the book sphere to resolve social problems associated with information and communication explosion. Analyze and evaluate the practices of communication and information support of St. Petersburg State International Book Fair. To identify the impact factors of antiviral restrictions and forms of social isolation on the communication practices of the International Book Fair. The research methodology continues the tradition found in the works of foreign theorists of the information society and social planning and design of communicative sphere, such as Marshall McLuhan, Daniel Bell, Manuel Costans, Peter Drucker, Thomas Day, and others. At the same time, a significant contribution to the development of this scientific paradigm was made by Russian scientists such as Nikita Moiseev, Anatoly Rakitov, Tamara Dridze, Igor Visujev, Lada, Leonid Smorgonov, Sergei Volodinkov, Galina Melnik, Dmitry Gavra, Vera Achkasova, and many others. The empirical base of the thesis is the materials of public organization, media documents, legal acts of the Russian Federation, the government of St. Petersburg, research materials by the author, who for 5 years was the head of St. Petersburg International Book Fair. The normative acts, communication project practices for the implementation of the processes of information support as socio-cultural planning and public administration were analyzed. The analysis of publication in the media, the internet, organizational information materials created during the implementation of the project was also carried out. The scientific novelty of the thesis is the following. The theoretical base of communication information support of state socio-cultural projects at the regional level was studied. The characteristics of the contradiction of the rapid development of modern information and social technologies are provided. They affect the design of socio-cultural regional events. The target setting of informed communication work during the implementation of a specific project identified. The importance and role of various authorities in communication information activities are determined. The way of implementation of the project of the St. Petersburg International Book Fair is presented. The stages of its development are delineated, as well as the forms of communication support are noted. Proposals were developed on the use of modern communication practices, information resources, on the example of St. Petersburg Book Fair. Based on the analysis of statistical and sociological fair, the effectiveness of the implementation of virtual form of communication information support for regional cultural project is shown. The defense provisions are the following. Theoretical research and practical experience show that planning is the most important factor and state policy aimed at solving the most problematic issues of the social life of citizens. The tasks of communication support to socially oriented state projects are achieved through system solutions, cultural orientation, information openness. In the modern world, the role played of traditional books and reading is undergoing significant transformation. However, the attention to the crisis of the book can and should become the basis for the systematic effort by the state to overcome the crisis. The world of books, a significant goal of the state social policy, helps to maintain an analytical attitude towards the realities of the society and a critical attitude towards a space of pseudo-free communication that negatively affects the society. Effective state support for the world of book is to use the experience of regional book-oriented socio-cultural projects, the result of which is the information saturation of the urban cultural space. The St. Petersburg International Book Fair serves as an example of effective implementation of the state regional socio-cultural design, the basis of which is the component of communication and information support. And this contributes to the creation of a positive image of the city. Global antivirus restrictions have shown the irreversibility of introducing new methods of internet communication during the program of the International Book Fair. The prospect of communication development of the book fair are the following. The consideration of the implementation of the UNESCO project, World Book Capital, which might allow to strengthen the image of the city as a cultural capital of Russia and recognize World Cultural Center. The practical significance of the study lies in the possibility of using its result to develop communication support of state culture-oriented projects, as well as in new curricula and when writing scientific papers on related topics. Final results and intermediary results of the thesis were reflected in the author's printed works, including the 4 in the publications included in the list of the Russian Academy of Education. One of St. Petersburg philosophers recently wrote, "Man writes books in order to grow up. Likewise, culture growing up amasses books. For the modern communicative information culture, one might say it, amassing books is an absolutely necessary and noticeable process nowadays." Thank you for your attention. I would like to address the members of the Dissertation Council. Are there any questions on the floor? Are there any questions concerning the presentation and the key provisions? Since there are no questions to the presentation, we will start the process of voicing the reviews. If there are no objections, the order will be the following. We will start with Nikonov Sergei Borisovich, then Pantarev Konstantin, then Kaminskaya Tatiana, then Aleynikov Sergei Viktorovich, then my review will be the final one. Are there any objections? None. Then I give the floor to Sergei Borisovich. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I would like to present my review on the thesis. The thesis by Shamrai Andrey, Grigorievich, on the topic Communication Design and Regional Public Administration, Socio-cultural Practices. In my opinion, the thesis is based on a long-term, comprehensive analysis of the object and subject of the research. I will not voice the object and the subject. I evaluated the work based on 3 criteria, and they are as following. The internal basis of the thesis. Is there a problem where the work is relevant? Whether it is independent work? And was scientific method used? In the very beginning of the thesis, the author focuses on the problem. I'm going to cite page 10. A large number of theoretical and research works of modern authors deals with the problem of the influence of the quickly developing information communicative technological environment on the traditional culture, in particular on the world of book and reading. Thus, the author had to choose the point of view and to analyze this point of view. Shamrai Andrey Grigorievich followed this criteria. The work is logical. The second criteria that I outlined is justified position, justified argument. And in here, I would like to have clarification over the following issues. Chapter 1. Chapter 1 consists of 2 sections. 1, socio-cultural design of state policy. In it, the author knows the topic and knows the viewpoint of other scientists. This chapter consists entirely of the arguments which were previously published on the topic. But in my opinion, there is abundance of arguments, and we don't get to the answer, but we see that there is a problem. And the conclusion that the author says, studying the problematic issue, the process of social planning and design ought to be accompanied by the reverse process for the benefit of the social projects. And in here, I would like to demand clarification. In the second section, the author ascertains that there is a necessity to conduct socio-cultural design. And in here, the author again uses many arguments of other scientists. The author says that another problem of denying the role of the state social design is the blurring of the notion democracy. At the same time, there is a group who considers those social cultural projects necessary. then following the logic of the author, it is illegitimate, since it does not demonstrate the public demand, but rather enforces it. And who is to decide that we are to plan for the benefit? I hope that we should not cite Victor Chernomyrdin. We've never had it, and now once again. We wanted to do what is better, but we got what we always get. Another discursive remark by the author is the following. Many researchers say that there was a highly negative effect of denationalization of culture taken from above in 1990s. I'd like to say that I, as the majority of Soviet people at the same time, were for denationalization. And this was all perceived as the victory of people over the previous state system. And the people of that time chose the leader of the country. And the author says that somebody from above, from top, is to be blamed for the denationalization. Whom do you mean? I did not have any questions about the second chapter. The justifications are enough. The third chapter is the result of comprehensive study of Bulgarian socio-cultural project and the practice of communication information carrying out of it based on the examples in Petersburg International Book Fair. Well, this chapter shows how regional authorities form a program and how it is carried out. Author says that the book fair might become, both in the eyes of professional participants and the audience, a publicly important cultural event. At the same time, Andrey Grigorievich uses statistics, which is important for research. Although the work lacks information about the age of the audience, if there are some elderly people who have developed their love for reading since early childhood, then the conclusion is not valid. When I was reading the thesis, I thought that the main idea will be to promote the love of reading books, of paperback books. But the final conclusions were a little bit different. The International Book Fair is an image aspect of the city, which forms a positive outlook on the city. I believe that both ideas are important, and the applicant will have to combine them in his future practical work. The third criteria is the following: whether the thesis arises at certain discursive points. Is there a perspective of conducting this work? We believe that it is possible and it is necessary to continue this work. And finally, I believe that the work is well justified. In my opinion, the thesis by Shamrai and Andrey Grigorievich, Communication Design in Regional Public Administration, Social-Cultural Practices, corresponds to the main provision of the order from the 19th of November 2021 on the procedure for awarding scientific degrees at Petersburg State University. And Shamrai and Andrey Grigorievich deserves being awarded the scientific degree of Candidate of Political Sciences, Major 599, Media Communication Journalism. Clauses 9 and 11 were not violated by the applicant. Thank you. Sergei Borisovich, thank you very much. You complied with the time limit. I suppose that the applicant will provide response after all the reviews are voiced. Since all the reviews are published on the website and they can be viewed there, I would offer my colleagues to voice only the key aspects. Are there any objections to this procedure? None. Konstantin Arsenьевич, the floor is yours. Dear colleagues, first of all, I would like to say that the thesis is based on an important topic, and the novelty of the problem is worth mentioning, since it is one of the first research which analyzes the specification of different information forms of carrying out a socio-cultural project. But today I would like to focus on their remarks, and I would like to move to the remarks. Well, I would recommend the author to change the name of the work. The thing is that the author should have analyzed all socio-cultural practices in the sphere of regional state administration. The author, nevertheless, looks at the support of books and reading in the region as the focus of the research, and regarded in using the example of St. Petersburg's International Book Fair. Thus, the name of the thesis should have included the following, based on the example of St. Petersburg International Book Fair. Second remark. The author should have explained in the introduction why all the existing sociocultural practices were limited by the author extremely to the support of reading in the region, and choosing St. Petersburg International Book Fair as an example. 3. It would be expedient to demonstrate the entire spectrum of the existing sociocultural practices in the sphere of regional state administration, which is not limited to the support of books and reading in the region. The fourth remark. The introduction should have been more specifically dedicated to the empirical base of the research, and which federal laws and bills and other documents in the area of culture, education and science lay the basis of the thesis. Nevertheless, all the above-mentioned recommendations do not have a negative effect on the appraisal of the thesis itself. The work corresponds to the main requirements according to the order of the 19th November 2021 on the order for awarding scientific degrees in St. Petersburg State University. And the applicant Shamrai Andrey Grigorievich deserves being awarded the scientific degree of Candidate of Political Sciences, Major 599, Media Communication and Journalism. Clauses 9 and 11 of the above-mentioned procedure were not violated by the candidate. Thank you for your attention. Now we give the floor to Tatiana Kaminskaya. I'm not going to list all the aspects of the thesis that I pointed out in my remark. I would like to say that Andrey Grigoriev faced a difficult task to analyze the ongoing events in which he takes part not only as a member of the audience, but as a member who is promoting such practices. I do agree that the information about the book fair should be found in the name of the thesis as well. But I'd like to focus on some of the remarks that I made. The graph of the info communication has too much generalization, and there are some outdated approaches listed in there among the 8 stages. The author says that explosive growth of information technology allows for new ways of promoting reading among the users of the technology, for whom such approach is becoming common. Nevertheless, the author focuses much more on the key mass media common in the territory of the Russian Federation. And VK Group of Book Fair became the main platform of promoting information about the fair. From the 1st of March till the 20th of May 2018, the number of subscribers of the book fair in VK reached 3,100. Well, we would like to say that these are not very significant figures. We know that many bloggers who make reviews on books have tens of thousands of subscribers. There are some bloggers who are very popular on the Instagram website. For example, the blogger Raccoon Demigod created a number of channels on reading books in Telegram, in YouTube, Bukowski, for example, which announces newly published books, and some other media resources which have many subscribers and which might be used as collaborative sources. We believe that they contain some journalism content and are highly popular among the subscribers. There are a lot of online resources of such as a non-commercial project, Gorky, the website The Shelf, and the educational project Azamas Academy, and so on. The thesis says nothing about the cross-platform approach to provide information, which proved to be highly efficient in promoting social ideas and political initiatives, which was used, for example, to promote the jubilees of writers. For example, in 2021, within the context of the 200 years from the birth of Dostoevsky and Nekrasov, this appealed to masses of public. There are regional and state projects. There are federal level initiatives on promoting interest to books, such as dictations, competitions, which take on board modern writers. We suppose that such productive ideas were not discussed in the thesis. Nevertheless, the theoretical and practical importance of the thesis and the cultural and scientific background of the author of the thesis are beyond doubt. Thus, the thesis by Shamrai and Andrey Grigorievich on the topic Communication Design in Regional State Administration, Socio-Cultural Practices corresponds to the key requirements of the order from the 19th of November 2021 on the procedure for awarding scientific degrees at the State University. And the applicant, Andrey Grigorievich, surprised as being awarded scientific degree of candidate political sciences, major 599, media communication and journalism. Clauses 9 and 11 were not violated. Thank you. Thank you, Tatiana Leonidovna. We give the floor to Aleynikov Sergei Viktorovich. Thank you, Galina Sergeyevna. Following the example of my colleagues, I won't voice the first complimentary part of the review. I was interested in the third chapter, and in which there was felt a certain level of personal interest in the topic, and the author provided the objective scientific analysis, not a personalized approach. And I fully agree with the author that since not only the accessibility of the material is important in the case of social communication, but the quality of the materials. And it has to comply to the ethics and aesthetics, as well as to communicative media possible. I highly evaluate the ideas of promotion of reading and books, and the usage of information support in order to present the events carried out in this respect. Nevertheless, there are certain aspects which require clarification. In the introduction, the author wanted to put each paragraph as a separate task, which resulted in excessive number of tasks and made it a little bit difficult to follow. Thus, task 6 and 7 could be put into one. Secondly, taking into account the work conducted in the social media, the low efficiency in Instagram is a worrying one. We know that demand creates supply, and the question arises, what will be done to address the youth audience, to appeal to them and to get them interested in the book culture. Also, there are certain ideas, the formulation of which was a little bit biased, thus it was not clear. These issues might serve the basis of the future research work. I'd like to say that the thesis by Shamrai, Andrey, Grigorievich, Communication Design and Regional Public Administration Socio-cultural Practices, corresponds to the main provisions of the order from the 19th of November 2021 on the order of awarding scientific degrees at Bedouin State University. And Shamrai Andrey Grigorievich deserves being awarded the scientific degree of the Candidate of Political Sciences, Major 599, Media Communication and Journalism. Clauses 9 to 11 of the above-mentioned order were not violated by the applicant. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Sergei Viktorovich. And I will voice my final review. I'd like to pay attention to the relevance of the topic, which is based on the provision of efficient functioning of the system of media communication environment of state administration. And the design of cultural policy is viewed within the framework of administrative activity and is a priority issue. And the thesis agrees that the movement of the modern society towards the lack of interest in books should be influenced in a more positive way. The content of the chapters was provided by the applicant himself. The thesis focuses on the support of anti-crisis state social-cultural projects and the usage of efficient methods of their design. The thesis is modern and relevant since it considers the new virtual forms of info communication, support of St. Petersburg International Book Fair in the context of pandemics and social isolation. The novelty is that the object is research on the regional level, and the regional concept of state projects on the regional level is analyzed. The empirical base is formed of the event plans and the reports of PR companies and media materials and documents. methods and comparative analysis allowed to solve all the tasks mentioned in the thesis. It is possible to agree with the main conclusions of the thesis, including the idea that information policy of the state should focus on ideological identification, which corresponds to the social code of the population, which triggers consolidation of the society, which in turn requires information analysis and information support of any project in the area. The reference material used is substantial. Nevertheless, there are several remarks to the work. First, some remarks are dedicated to the stylistics and make the understanding of the sentences difficult. There are certain stylistically incorrect phrases, page 14. Page 109, the word campaign, not company. Page 13, one of the tasks was to analyze the problematic factors. It's better to use not problematic but positive and negative factors. The second remark is the following. The methodology of the research requires explanation in the text. The specific methods described in the introduction are provided as operational procedure methods. On page 14, there is the analysis of the practices of project design, the method of analysis of the process communication, method of analysis of information design, socio-cultural planning. And it is obvious that we are talking about the analysis of the material that was provided by political scientists. Page 22 sees the use of the notion subject-oriented or object-oriented approach. The author says that the analysis of documents was carried out, while the particular methods were not mentioned. The media part of the empirical research is rather weak. It should have been expanded, and the technology of the cooperation of international book fair with the traditional new media should be demonstrated, and the relevant models of cooperation of political authorities and editorial staff of mass media should be analyzed. Nevertheless, I believe that the thesis of Shamrai and Andrey Grigorievich on the topic communication design in regional public administration, socio-cultural practices, correspond to the main provision of the Order number 1911/2021 on awarding the scientific degrees in Padua State University. And the applicant reminded Grigorievich has been awarded the scientific degree of Candidate of Political Sciences, Major 599, Clause 911, were not violated by the applicant. I suppose that now it's time for us to hear your responses to the remarks. Thank you very much for all the remarks that were voiced. It's a great honor for me that you've studied all this information in such detail. I will try to provide response to a number of remarks. In response to Galina Sergeyevna Melnik's remark that the research methodology must be explained in the text, I'd like to say the following. In the introduction, we can see that the basis of the research was the general scientific methodological principles, that of objectivity, that focus on the priority of facts over interpretations, historicity, requiring consideration of phenomena in their specific historical environment, taking into account cause and effect relationship, consistency, which consists in identifying links in the accumulated body of knowledge, In the context of the above-mentioned principles, the general scientific methods played a significant role in this study: chronological analysis, synthesis, induction, and deduction. The research methodology continues the tradition laid down in the works of foreign theorists and the information society, such as social planning and design of communicative sphere, such as Marshall McLuhan, Daniel Bell, Manuel Castell, Peter Drucker, and Thomas Day. At the same time, and this was mentioned in the introductory speech, the study is based on the theoretical contribution to the development of scientific paradigm of Russian scientists, such as Bestuzhev Lada, Nikita Moiseev, Anatoly Rakitov, Danilo Melik, Dmitry Gavar, Leonid Morganov, Vera Chkasova, and a number of others. These researchers are credited with the development of methodology for analysis of communication processes, including project and state activities in relation to modern Russian reality. The basic methodological approach to the study of design problem has become a structural function approach that meets the criteria of subject-oriented analysis. The state as a political institution begins to act as an actor, the subject of the creation and implementation of projects of various types, which contributes to strengthening the social foundations for the functioning and development of the society. The system of empirical research methods made it possible to test the hypotheses put forward in this study, such as observation, questioning, and case study method were used to study the impact factors of antiviral restrictions and form of social exclusion on the book sphere. Methods of collecting and evaluating documentary information, such as content analysis and classical analysis of documents, made it possible to analyze the content of state projects and regulations at the federal and regional level in the field of cultural and social policy, as well as publications in media, the internet, on the design of social-cultural activities. As for the media part of the empirical research, I would like to say the following. In Appendix number 1, page 177, in the form presentation, you can see a full report on the information supported in the Petersburg International Book Fair in 2018. Along with the general media results, the report represents the strategy of the PR campaign, the practice of implemented information support, the key performance indicators are revealed, the number of publications, the website traffic is analyzed, and the press release citation is analyzed. The analysis of social networks is presented by the following parameters: the audience coverage, number of views, engagement rate. The media plan also presented in the report, and it illustrates the participation of federal and local media partners. Unfortunately, due to a large amount of material, it was possible to include the works related to the media component was done in only limited way. As for a remark by Sergei Viktorovich Oleynikov, who was concerned about the poor efficiency in the use of social network Instagram, and what has been or will be done in terms of involving the youth audience in book culture, increasing the demand for book products regardless of the presentation formats, and stimulating reading. First of all, I'd like to clarify the following. The role of the Instagram in the support of book fair is rather significant, and the creators of the projects understood it really well. Therefore, this corresponding page in the social network was created during the days of the fair in 2018, and its necessity was noted in the media report. On the other hand, the events of the fair were quite actively covered on the Instagram pages of the participants and visitors of the program events. Also, when evaluating the effectiveness of Instagram, it must be taken into account that the active mention of the book fair in the network is largely determined by its reactivity, and the coverage of the event increases 100-fold during the days of it being carried out. On the involvement of youth audience, the program of the fair has always organized a sufficient number of events designed for the youth sector, the invitations of relevant publishing houses, authors, participants in the cultural program. Study of the audience of visitors of the book festival showed that the age up to 29 years of age is accounts for 50% of the total number of visitors. I'd like to say that in the winter book fair, all 3 evenings were dedicated to the youth audience. 2 plays were staged, and the 3rd evening was dedicated to Marina Katsuba, and we had a full house. I'd like to express gratitude to Tatiana Leonidovna Kaminskaya. In her remarks, Tatiana Leonidovna says, the scheme on infoculcation support, considering the thesis, has some outdated approaches and there is too much overgeneralization. On one hand, the author points out the need to take event at the global level, and that explosive development of information technology represents great opportunities in developing new ways to popularize and promote reading among users of those technology, for whom they are becoming a familiar cultural environment. On the other hand, the author focuses on proposals for cooperation with leading media and media resources that are familiar only to the Russian audience. Talking about the growth dynamics and the involvement of internet audience in St. Petersburg International Book Fair, it can be noted that in 2020, as a result of pandemic restrictions, the fair was held online. If we take only VK network, there were more than 1 million visitors of the live broadcast. In May 2021, the number of internet users watching the work of St. Petersburg International Book Fair, according to the latest data from the organizers, accounted for 2.5 million people. And this explosive growth was due to the use of new modern communication technology. The study of the capabilities in socio-cultural oriented projects requires separate study, and the author will continue to work in this direction in the future. As for cooperation with the leading media resources familiar to the Russian audience, the author believes the combination of traditional approach with the introduction of modern info-communication technologies is the best strategy for the implementation of book-oriented social products. Moreover, traditional media are already actively using digital network technologies. The example on page 191. There are about 3 visitors of a popular website. I agree with Tatiana Leonidovna that collaboration is needed with the internet resources that are popular with the youth population. And I suppose that the section Internet Resources in Appendix 1 can be considered a type of such collaboration. Tatiana Leonidovna also noted that the thesis doesn't say anything about the cross-platform approach to the presentation of information. And based on this approach, it was noted that promotion of social ideas about the anniversary of world-famous writers proves effective. I would like to say that the book fair in 2017 was linked with the topic the year of Dmitry Ligachev. Then the year of ecology also became the key theme of the fair. And there are other examples of such approach. And many further examples were not mentioned in the thesis. For example, the book fair focused on the year of the cinema, on the year of the theatre, the year of literature, centenary anniversary of Daniil Granin. The cross-platform approach was also the basis of the World Book Capital application. I agree with Sergei Borisovich Nikonov the following remark. the categorical conclusion that the study of the problem field in the very process of social planning and design should be accompanied by a reverse process. Informing the society for the benefit of which a social project is being created requires qualification, and who decides what planning is for the benefit. And this question brings us back to the definition of the purpose of social design. The purpose of the social design is related to the definition and implementation of desired social future or ideal benefit. And the person can influence the environment and themselves as a part of the environment, lays the basis of the philosophical idea of this design. So your remark, who decides what is the planning for the benefit? Modern state policy in the field of information has two directions. First of all, this is policy aimed at technological implementation of information and communication system. And in here, authority has two significant components. That's publicity and public trust. The publicity of management is determined by the presence of free mutual discussion of management objects and decisions. Public trust provides state policy and its long-term activities with a well-coordinated social communication and helps to achieve ultimate goals. The second direction is the purposeful policy is the rational projective impact on society. In this direction, the society should create ideology as a special way to manage processes that have informational nature. Sergei Borisovich also made the following remark. Many researchers know the extremely negative effect of the denationalization of nature, of a culture undertaken from above. In my opinion, this is not entirely accurate conclusion, since you said you were present in the country at the period, and the people and I, as a part of the Soviet people, wanted and was glad to denationalize culture. Well, thanks for this reminder. I myself, as part of the Soviet people, witnessed and participated in many events that took place on the field of culture and media in the 90s. I would also like to note that the quotation from my text is the mentioning of a wide range of options that existed about the period. And this is not a conclusion. I'm sure that the study of these complex processes taking place in the field of culture in our country in the 90s of the last century is a topic for a separate in-depth study. Sergei Borisovich also remarked that there is no sociological data on the age of visitors. All the sociological data on the age, education, and so on of the visitors can be seen in the appendices, page 133, 137, and page 230 to 131. The age statistics is extremely important. And as I have already mentioned, more than 50% of the visitors were under 29. As for the recommendation by Konstantin Panterev to slightly change the title of the work, Konstantin Panterev says that in the current version, the author should have analyzed all possible socio-cultural practices in the field of regional government. And the second remark is that author should have explained why the analysis of all existing socio-cultural practices of regional public administration were reduced to exclusively the support of books and reading in the region. It would not be superfluous in the work to show the entire spectrum of the existing socio-cultural practices in the field of regional public administration, which of course are not limited to support for books and reading in the region, and the functioning use and participation in the National Book Fair. I would like to say that book is the main form of transmission of cultural information, cultural communication in society. In the modern world, the role and place of traditional books and reading is undergoing significant transformation, the reason for which is explosive growth of new information technologies and communication practices based on them, which cause concern in society and in the scientific community. However, the attention towards the crisis of book can and should become the basis of systematic efforts to overcome it with the active participation of the state. A comprehensive scientific study of the development and implementation of information support for a specific effective original book-oriented social project has not yet been carried out. That is why I, as the author, wanted to focus on the fate of the book in the era of information communication explosion. And in here I can apply all my practical experience in managing said book-oriented social-cultural project, which I hope is reflected in the empirical part of the work. Of course, the entire range of existing socio-cultural practices in the field of written and public administration is much wider. It includes theatre, cinema, education, and so on. And each of these aspects deserves separate studies. I'll be glad if my work will help to carry out further studies. I'd like to thank all the members of the Dissertation Council for the attention that they paid to my work. Thanks to your attention and your professional view, we identified a number of stylistic and technical inaccuracies, and you provided valuable recommendations on the structure and illustrations of the thesis. I will take all your remarks into account in my future works. Thank you, Andrey Grigorievich, and I would like to address the members of the Dissertation Council. Dear colleagues, are you satisfied with the answers provided? We're fully satisfied, thank you. Fully satisfied, thank you. We need to clarify if there were any questions received via online broadcast. There were none. So we're going to give the floor to Vera Alexeyevna, the scientific advisor. You have 3 minutes. Dear members of the Dissertation Council, the head of the Dissertation Council, our cooperation with Andrey Grigorievich has a history of its own. Since we started cooperating from 2016. Thus, we've been focusing on this idea for 6 years, so to say. The applicant approached me with the ready-made ideas, which were successfully discussed in the thesis. Since his life is linked to the media structures, and the applicant is aware of the media sphere. Since 1991, he became the head of the information agency Northwest, and one of its tasks was to carry out the projects in culture, education, and educational journalistic programs. The agency was one of the first companies that used the internet. The applicant worked in other companies as well, was the chief executive of the media union in Moscow, then the chief executive of the editorial center Petrocent, and published the news publications in Petersburg Diary, a journal. And Petrocent started the St. Petersburg International Book Fair. And thanks to the experience of the applicant of working in media spheres, state spheres, and business communication, thanks to knowing the JAR approach, the empirical data, and the desire to share the unique experience with the colleagues, laid the foundation of this thesis. The work is well justified, novel, and relevant. The results can be seen implemented in the daily work aspect of the applicant in dealing with the social projects. And a new public space of book park is being carried out by the applicant. I suppose that we heard the defense of valuable research work, and the applicant deserves being awarded the scientific degree of the candidate of political sciences. And I'd like to ask the members of the Dissertation Council to support the applicant. Thank you, Vera Alexeyevna. And prior to finishing the discussion, I'd like to address the members of the Dissertation Council and those present. Dear colleagues, Татьяна Леонидовна, the number of the order is 111, not 11. Pay attention to the number of the order. Dear colleagues, I would like to thank the applicant, and I have a rhetoric or discursive question. St. Petersburg International Book Fair. Will it be held only in the territory of St. Petersburg, or it can be carried in Pskov, Pridnestrovye? This is a discursive question. Might it help to develop this book topic? Tatiana Legana, do you have such fairs in Pskov? I'm not sure about the scale, so we can't have such scale as in St. Petersburg. Can you imagine St. Petersburg International Book Fair on the basis of Tiraspol? I'm fully in favor. This idea can be developed, but I'd like to say, but then it will be a rather expensive project. St. Petersburg is a cultural capital, so it is appropriate for St. Petersburg. I suppose there is no need to answer the question. And now I need to address the members of the Dissertation Council and the applicant himself. To the members of the Dissertation Council and the applicant himself, have any questions or objections to the procedure of the meeting, including the remote access mode? None. No remarks. Then we move to the next stage of the procedure. Dear colleagues, prior to the meeting, we might declare the break to discuss the results of the defense with muted sound. What do you think? Do we need such a break to discuss the results of the defense? No, there is no need for the break. In such a case, we continue the meeting. I raise the question of awarding Shamrai Andrey Grigorievich the scientific degree of the candidate of political sciences 599, media communication and journalism. I declare the open roll call. Time is 4 o'clock, 15 minutes Moscow time. So we start the open voting. Voting for, each member of the Decision Council agrees that clauses 9 and 11 of the procedure were not violated by the order. The clauses 9 and 11 are the following. In the thesis, the applicant is to refer to the author or the source of the use of the materials. And if the thesis contains the results of research conducted by the author together with other authors or by the author of the thesis himself, this has to be noted in the text of the thesis. The decision is considered to be taken if no more than half of the members of the council, no fewer than 3, voted for it. Nikonov your idea. I vote for. I address Panzerevich Konstantin Arsenyevich. Your idea. I vote for. I'd like to address the member of the Decision Council, Kamenskaya Tatiana Leonidovna. I vote for. I'd like to address Alenikov Sergei Viktorovich. I vote for. And I, the head of the council, I vote for. Thus, dear colleagues and guests, I'd like to declare that out of 5 participants of the voting, 5 members of the Decision Council voted for. Nobody abstained, none voted against. The decision to award Shamrai Andrey Grigorievich the scientific degree of the candidate of political sciences was taken, and will give the floor to the applicant for the final word. Once again, I'd like to thank the members of the Decision Council for their attention to the work. My colleagues in the High School of Journalism and Media Communication for their support. I'd like to thank my scientific advisor, Alexeyevna, for her help and assistance. Thank you very much for help in the research. Dear colleagues, the members of the Decision Council, we congratulate the applicant with awarding the scientific degree of candidate of political sciences. Congratulations. I'd like to thank everyone for participation. I declare the meeting closed. Turn off the live broadcast, please.